Hello again. Here comes back the villainous son. Yes, I am absolutely guilty, and there is nothing what could possibly explain my wrongful behavior. But since I don't see no point in making worthless excuses, let's just get straight to the point. Since this time our vacations were slightly prolongated, the best option is to start the 2020 semester with something concrete. Do you think that a lesson about anti-gravity will do the job for the beginning? Of course, I am absolutely aware how most of physicists will react to this particular term. Calling it as a provocative is a big understatement. It simply turns them on just like red color turns on a bull. So to make the subject of today's lesson assimilable for people who treat physics as a profession, instead of anti-gravity, we can also use a professionally sounding term which describes this mechanism as gravitational expulsion of plasma. I'm sure that many of you think that such exotic subject requires us to deal with just like exotic physics. But just like many times before, it turns out that all necessary answers are in fact served on a golden plate and that there is nothing exotic about this meal. It's just a regular burger with fancy dressing. Generally, if you expect that I will speak here about 8 dimensions of space for quantum tunneling in the entanglement of gravitons, or inverse curvature of spacetime for spatial turbulences within an n-dimensional wormhole, you won't get it today. We won't deal today with anything what is beyond experimentally proven facts that can be tested at home. What I speak about today is nothing else than physics in its purest form. Everything what I will present in this movie will be fully consistent with directly observed processes. No multidimensional realities or parallel timelines. Only couple simple laws regarding behavior of matter in the state of plasma and its interactions with our natural environment. Everything what you will hear in this movie is based on a single experimentally proven process. Matter in the state of plasma experiences a lifting force in gravitational field of Earth, and since this effect is observed even if density of medium is very low inside a vacuum chamber, such behavior can't be explained with the force of buoyancy, as matter can't experience buoyant force if its medium is a vacuum. Okay, now comes the funniest part. Those of you who treat physics as a hobby just as I do will say, and? But someone with actual knowledge about physics will at the same moment say, how can it be? And this is a total nonsense. And in some cases even, you're a complete moron. Or GTFO with your new age pseudoscientific bullcrap and let smart people do the science. I researched this subject long enough to know how scientists react to uncomfortable facts. In this case, the uncomfortable truth is simple. Modern physics is completely unable to explain this process in any other way than with buoyancy. And since buoyancy doesn't apply to the scenario where electric arc experiences an upward lift in a vacuum tube, once again physics finds itself in the shithole of natural science. Before I made this movie, I tried couple times to speak about this subject with people who consider themselves professional physicists, and mostly they just simply refused to accept experimentally proven facts and decided to reject the observed physical reality in the form which is presented to us in real life. Those who knew a bit more about actual physics remained mostly silent and preferred to keep their opinion to themselves. I started to research this subject 2 years ago, but until today I didn't find no one who would try to look for answers to my questions. Well, lucky me. It just so happens that I don't need anyone to tell me if I can or can't come to my own conclusions, if no one else besides me seems to be interested in researching new fields of physics. How could I miss such great opportunity which is given to everyone capable of using own brain? It would be nice to be remembered as someone who invented anti-gravitational plasma propulsion system from a simple microwave oven. But for now, let's take a look at the process known as gravitational expulsion of plasma. For all those who think that my claims belong to science fiction, make a simple Google YouTube search for plasma in vacuum. But if this is beyond your capacity, allow me to show you a couple movies which I found by myself. Notice that the plasma arc is almost always curved outward in relation to Earth's surface. As you could see on those movies, plasma seems always to be curved, lifted upward, and the higher its density, the stronger this effect appears to be. Those are only simple statements regarding physical processes that can be directly observed by each one of us. But as I've learned before, physicists don't see any problems in rejecting observed reality. So after seeing those movies, most of them will probably say, "I don't believe you, this is buoyancy, and stay quiet." I went through this couple times already, and it always went like this. Problem is that today I know a way to counter even such kind of arguments, and how to do it in the most hideous way possible. You see, for many scientists, the greatest enemy is the science itself. There is no better way to disprove invalid claims of a scientist than to use his own weapon against him. Sure, scientists don't have any obligation to treat seriously any claims which are made by ignorants like me. But what if claims in question are being made by people who also have full right to call themselves professional physicists? Here is a very short paper called simply Expulsion of Plasma in a Gravitational Field. Link in description box. It was published in 2016, but until today no one seems to be particularly interested in a further research or even in bringing this subject into public attention. Of course, what is being presented here is the math which validates practical experiments in which plasma keeps experiencing upward lift even if the density of medium is decreased to a level where the force of buoyancy can be easily ignored. What is being proposed here as a possible mechanism of expulsion in a gravitational field is the idea that weight or a rest mass can become negative at a certain level of thermal energy. I completely agree with such idea, and I use it as a base for further claims, like the one about the ratio of energy emission and absorption being the main factor for expulsion attraction of mass in a gravitational field. So at this point I can support my claims with A. Direct observations, B. Practical experiments, C. Numerical equations. It is all what we need to start treating any claim as a proven scientific fact, and yet most of physicists still will tell me at this point that they don't believe, they don't think so, or they will call it a complete rubbish and consider such opinion as scientifically valid. Problem is that my case is slightly different, as I don't care too much about the opinion of people who think that their authority was granted to them together with some serious looking diploma and a certificate of education. I keep looking for answers despite all the people telling me how stupid it looks to them. And this is why I can now claim full rights to the first model of an anti-gravity propulsion system that uses the gravitational expulsion of plasma to get a force of lift in a gravitational field. Of course, real physicists will without a single thought call me a stupid ignorant and say that what we see here is nothing more than a clear example of buoyancy force, and the plasma tries to escape from a medium with higher density, what in case of Earth's surface mean up, and there is nothing anti-gravitational about this process, as it's just a simple difference of density. But do you know how I look at this situation? For me, physicists look like a bunch of losers who never want to say anything controversial because others might call them stupid. I, on the other hand, don't give a crap if someone calls me stupid or not. I just pick out the most logical solution. So call me stupid if you like to. I don't have any authority to lose here, so why should I care? And since I don't see the reason to care, nothing stops me from making such bold claims as the one which I'm about to make right now. I, Bartłomiej Staszewski, born 30th of January 1984 in Tarnowskie Góry, Poland, claims as mine the entire intellectual property of anti-gravity plasma propulsion system that uses the mechanism of gravitational expulsion to generate the kinetic lift of mass. I've made a rather decent Google search, and I'm pretty sure that except the paper which I presented you earlier and another one of the same author about which I will speak later, there is completely nothing on the internet about negative weight and expulsion of plasma in gravitational field, not to mention about a potential application in aeronomy. Science seems to be completely unaware of scientifically proven facts presented here.
If any of you know anything about an existing theory, ongoing research, or concept of a model that uses the same or even similar forces and laws applied to them as the ones which I will discuss in this movie, and probably in couple next movies as well, please let me know in the comments. As far as I know, at this moment L. Dmitrievi and E. M. Nikushenkoi are the only two people on this planet who ever mentioned about gravity, expulsion and plasma in a single sentence. I found also one channel on YouTube called Ciencias Aplicadas e Experimentación, where I found three movies called Microwave Plasma Antigravitic Systems 1, showing plasma spheres in a microwave oven. But besides those two cases, there is completely nothing about this process on the internet, at least on English or Polish sites. Of course, I'm aware of the fact that my rights to this intellectual property are at this point completely virtual, as I don't have any real patent for things which I'm about to discuss in this movie. However, by claiming those rights in public, I will at least secure them virtually. It's better than nothing. This way, if in the future there will be someone else who will try to claim the rights to the general theory of anti-gravity plasma propulsion system, which is based on the idea of gravitational expulsion and negative wave of mass in a gravitational field, then everyone who saw my movie earlier will be my witnesses, if I would have to confront that person. There is also another thing which can secure my right to call those ideas as my own. I don't know about any other person except me who would work on a model of gravity which could possibly explain the expulsion of plasma using the Cheerios effect induced on floating objects as a way to visualize forces of gravity. But before I start to discuss the theoretical aspects in my model of gravity that should be able to explain gravitational expulsion of plasma, first I want to propose a practical experiment which will allow anyone to make a final validation of my claims regarding gravitational expulsion and once and for all dispel all doubts and misunderstandings. The general idea of this experiment is rather simple. We need only to prove that a mass introduced into a gravitational field will experience upward lift of plasma despite insignificant densities of matter in medium. If the upward lift of plasma exists only due to the force of buoyancy, then in vacuum chamber the lift of plasma won't affect the total weight of a sealed container. However, if the total weight of a sealed container inside a vacuum chamber will decrease due to the lift of plasma, then my claims about the anti-gravity propulsion system will become scientifically valid and I will gain full right to consider myself a genius of physics, without making a single mathematical calculation. Here is a simple comparison between the force of buoyancy, left, and gravitational expulsion of plasma, right. Red object inside the left container represent balloons filled with helium. Yellow ball inside the right container represents a sphere of plasma. If medium inside the larger container will have higher density of matter in relation to the total density of mass inside the smaller container, wave of the sealed container will be reduced in both cases. But if the matter inside the bigger chamber will drop to a negligible level, wave of the sealed container with helium balloons won't be no longer reduced by the force of buoyancy which is induced on balloons. But what in such case will happen with the wave of a sealed container inside the vacuum chamber on the right image? According to science, there won't be no reduction of container's wave due to lift of plasma. However, something tells me that science is wrong once again, and due to the lift of plasma, the inner container will still have reduced wave since plasma inside it will still experience expulsion. I would also recommend to use a grape as the source of plasma, since the flame of a candle will use oxygen from the sealed container and it might have some influence on the measured wave. And if I'm correct, then the force experienced by plasma due to gravitational expulsion can be used as a propulsion for any object which is located in an external gravitational field. However, the further that object will get from the center of that field, the weaker will be the expulsion of plasma, and at some altitude, force of lift will disappear completely. And since force of expulsion is being induced only within a gravitational field and is always directed in opposite direction to gravitational attraction, there is no other force which would fit better to the term antigravity. So while it won't allow us to make an interplanetary journey, it might be very useful in sending a craft to Earth's orbit or to allow it to hover above the surface of a planet, even if there won't be no atmosphere. If you wonder why there is such strong rejection of the idea that gravity might induce a repulsive force on matter, then you should know that according to physics gravity can result only in the attraction of mass. If it wouldn't be true, It would mean that the model of gravity which is currently used isn't correct, and they don't have any other which could explain expulsion. Luckily, they have me, someone who doesn't care about scientific correctness and isn't afraid to make claims which for physicists are far too bold and far too radical to be discussed in public. Everything what matters to me is if something seems to make sense or not. I came to this idea some time ago, but it took me 3 more years to make any actual use of it, as I started to research the subject of gravity relatively recently. But I think that the time has come at last to take this toy out of my closet and show you how you can observe gravity in your own milk soup. Some of you might remember that in a movie about dark matter and the gravitational fields of galaxies, I've used so-called rubber sheet analogy of gravity to show you that mass concentrated in a point will create a different gravitational field than the same mass distributed over a larger volume of space. So we can just like this apply the shell theorem to all objects with spherical circular geometry. However, to explain the process of gravitational expulsion, I will have to introduce an upgraded model of gravity, which uses a much better way to visualize gravitational interactions between objects with different densities of mass. However, most of physicists will agree that the rubber sheet analogy of gravity is not a fully valid representation of the spacetime curvature due to mass-energy distribution in space, and I actually agree with them. My main issue with the rubber sheet model is its dependence on an external source of gravity. It's completely useless in a microgravity environment. Besides being capable of visualizing the process of gravitational expulsion, my upgraded model of gravity is working without any external gravitational field. Do you wonder what kind of miracles such models requires from us? Well, we just need water. What can be seen in this movie are the forces associated with so-called Cheerios effect. Here you can see a motion path of a moving object curves around a massive object. And here you can see that the force of attraction is stronger for objects with higher rest mass, just as it's supposed to be. Here you can see that around objects with a higher than water density of mass energy, surface curvature has downward orientation, and objects with similar density attract each other. However, objects that curve the surface upward due to low density in relation to a medium are being repelled from dense objects. But as I always try to confront my private ideas with actual science, I wrote a question on AskAnAstrophysicist.com. Here's the answer which I've received. What matters here at most is of course the part about gravity being only attractive and not repulsive force. But as I proved you a couple minutes ago, this is not true. It seems that just by simple observation and basic deduction, I've managed to figure out the best possible solution to the mystery of gravitational expulsion. It seems as well that my upgraded model of gravity shows its full capabilities in microgravity, where water gains spherical geometry. Problem is that to explain properly my upgraded model of gravity, I will have to speak about the primary laws in the core engine of physics, known as mass-energy equivalence. In shortcut, I will have to come out with something that will replace the most famous formula in physics, E equals m times c squared, as it seems that it can't handle the process of gravitational expulsion. And of course, I wouldn't make such irrational statements if I couldn't support them with something concrete. Truth is that I'm making this movie right now because 1 week ago, on the day 02022020, I've connected all the dots and completed at last my work on the unified theory of universe. Not only I found a way to fully integrate all parts of my research into a single model, but I've also found a way to directly prove everything using the physics of a hadron collider. What I have is a model of gravity which is valid on all levels of scale dimension, and uses the same Galilean model of relativity which I presented in couple of my previous movies. In shortcut, I came out with an idea which can be rightfully called as quantum gravity, something what is considered a holy grail in modern physics. I would be stupid if I wouldn't want any credit for it. And do you know what is the most funny part of it? I did all of this without making any actual math. As always, everything was already done on my behalf. All I did was to apply most simple logic to directly observed scientific facts. But I don't want to overheat the brain cells of my viewers, so I will present the complete theory in the next movie. As for today, class dismissed.